Wonderful people, welcome to the Antidote. It's your boy Ryan Burden. We're a little bit late tonight. Thanks for rocking with me. Let's make sure that folks over on IG, you know how it goes, that they get the notifications. Super excited for the show tonight. Before we get there, gotta shout out the Indiana Pacers. What a comeback! What a game! We got to find some joy in crazy times, and right now the NBA playoffs are that for me. Tyrese Halliburton is showing everybody just how wrong they were about being the most overrated player in the league, in my opinion. If you follow me on IG, you can see I'm getting dragged for having the audacity to suggest that Angel Reese is a good basketball player, and lots of white men in my comments have decided that she's trash. And I got money on Angel Reese against every single one of them. So yeah, that's that. We're doing well here. We're doing well here. It's summer. We gotta love that. Tonight's show, we are going to be pretty focused on the upcoming 5-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. We got a great guest. I can't wait to introduce y'all to him. We're gonna give it some time for folks to enter in. Make sure that Instagram is working. It looks like it is. Here we are. We're over on the YouTube. So if you're on YouTube watching live, feel free to throw comments and questions in the chat. We are gonna keep it dialogical. We want to interact with you. So jump in there. Let us know. We'll do our best to answer questions, to discuss what y'all are talking about there. Also, we're gonna do our best to make sure that we get to catch some of the Wolves game because, like I said, the NBA playoffs are bringing me all kinds of joy right now, and the Timberwolves play tonight, so I do want to catch some of that. We're gonna talk about some more important things though. Again, this is the Antidote. I am your host, Ryan Verdon. The Antidote is a weekly show we do every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 5 o'clock Pacific for my folks out there in Cali. We talk about what's happened in the world in the last week, and we dive deep on those subjects. We also spend some intentional time talking about what do we do, right? We analyze it through Barbara Love's framework of liberatory consciousness. So we're aware of things, we develop an analysis, we talk about some actions, and we talk about accountability to make the world a better place, ideally. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guests. So I hope folks have joined over there on the Instagram. Don't forget to like this, no matter where you're watching. If you're watching live, hit the like button. If you are catching this after Thursday, and you know you're just scrolling YouTube and you came across this, hit the like, hit the subscribe button. We're trying to build this community. I'm pretty proud of what we're doing here, and so if it resonates with you, it means a lot to like and subscribe, and it costs you nothing. So please do that. Please consider doing that. Let's get to it, y'all. Let's get to it. So my guest this week is Jeremy Norton. He's a 25-year EMT in Minneapolis. He's an author, just an all-around really dope guy. So we're gonna welcome him to the show right now. What's up, Jeremy? How you doing?
I'm doing well. I got a little worried with all that love on the Pacers that you'd absolutely forsaken your Minnesota roots.
Absolutely not. Listen, let me be clear. I'm hat tipping to last night's game, but I want the Knicks to come out of that series. I want the Knicks to come out of there. Like, can you imagine Cat and Julius Randle in the finals? You can't get a better win-win than that. I don't think, at least.
Yeah.
I don't think. So Jeremy, man, thank you so much for being here, for taking time out of your Thursday night. Why don't you just give folks a little bit? I gave a little bit of the introduction. I think it's always better when you can introduce yourselves. Tell these folks who you are and what you're doing.
All right, appreciate you. First of all, thanks again for having me, Ryan. I'm 25 years. I've worked for the Minneapolis Fire Department. I'm a fire captain. I've been a captain since 2007. One of the things that shapes a lot of what I think and write about is I joined the fire department knowing a little bit about what we would do in terms of it. It wasn't only fighting fires; it was doing a lot of EMS work. And the more time I spent, the more I realized that kind of my background in liberal arts and teaching really informed a lot of the sociological aspects of what we see every day. So when we see people who are unhoused, we see people who have substance abuse issues, we see people who have generations of poverty. It's really easy if you're coming at it uncritically to say that's them, we're over here. But I'm not special. If I didn't have a job and health insurance, I wouldn't necessarily be doing all right. And so one
Right.
of the things I started writing about is that tension between trying to help people who struggle and trying to see, like, having kind of a radical creative empathy. And at the same time knowing we're not going to be able to save a lot of the people. So it's a career steeped in suffering and sorrow and other people's loss. And so it's that balance between putting up a wall and then also maintaining accountability, right? And that is shit. I grew up in DC. I kind of came from an educated background. I went to school. I have a graduate degree, and I did not want to kind of go into lawyering or any of that. So while working different jobs, the fire department seemed like a good way to work, help the community, and have time to raise a family, which I've been able to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. You also found time to write a book, brother.
I did. I did. It took a
It's an
while.
amazing book. Can you talk a little bit about the book? I realized that we didn't go into how much I was going to ask you to talk about kind of what you're
Oh, that's
bringing
cool.
to this space.
No,
But
that's
it's a
cool.
phenomenal book. Let the people know
All right. Well,
because
appreciate
it's
it.
it's
So,
based on a lot of what you're talking about.
yeah, no, absolutely. So I started compiling kind of. I mean, it's. I started in 2000 writing about what I thought I was going to be doing versus what I was actually doing. And what I'd started writing about was just scenes from before birth to after death, what we see, the way in which we have kind of a front row and all access pass to other people's lives. And I didn't want to write just about the blood and guts, which is what a lot of people do. I really, really was looking at us understanding the context, like what I call the sociology, small s, because I'm not a sociologist, but like how race, class, and gender shapes who gets help, the help they receive, and then who does the helping, right? And so the more I was writing about that, and then the more I started looking at all the ways that essentially structural racism and bias play out. This is a job that across the country was predominantly and exclusively, straight but white men for decades and
Right.
generations, and no one else was allowed to apply. So if you look on the wall, just like on a university, just like at a bank, all the faces of the old leaders are all old white guys, not because you and I are any better than anyone else at doing the job, but no one else was allowed. So I'd
Right.
start writing about all that stuff, and then I kept coming back to the systemic and the individual when we're looking at racial interactions. And so by the time I responded to the killing of George Floyd 5 years ago this weekend, I'd been on other death by police calls. And when I was a chief for a while, I was in charge of a district where there was another death by police call, and then the aftermath there, right? And so, oh, thank you, buddy.
Yeah,
Um,
make sure you check that out.
all
Trauma
right,
Sponges is it's a really dope book.
I can even do this. Boop,
Yeah, and then also,
boop.
yeah, go ahead and do that.
No, 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 we're good. But so that I'd already like I've been writing about that. I wrote about a what I called a near miss at Cup Foods in 2017, where
Yeah.
where a guy, kind of like a cat just caught a stray bullet, which was just life in the city. But then the way the police responded was so much more of a threat, and I was like, oh, this blindness is going to lead to something really bad. And it was like I almost led my crew into the cops shooting everything that scared them, and everything that scared them that day were black people shouting at them. Right. So then,
I've been in that situation in Minneapolis.
right. Right.
Yeah.
But the thing is, and this is what I was trying to say, no one knew what they were doing, meaning everyone was amped. Their context and the way their system is, and I'm a firefighter. I'm not a cop, so I don't, but I've worked on the streets enough to see the way the differences in our response models, right? But that they kind
Yeah.
of had this pile in model, and no one was really. They just come in to swarm to help out, and so by the time we responded to the killing of George Floyd, I'd seen others, and I've been on other calls where the cops definitely knew they had killed somebody, and by the time we got there, there were 30 squads, there were investigators, the whole scene was locked down. That night, 5 years ago was not like that because they did not know what they had done. Like that.
So for the audience out there, Jeremy, you were the first responder.
No. The
To
paramedics got there ahead of us.
the
Then we
paramedics
got
got
there.
there first.
Yeah.
Okay, so paramedics are there, then you get there.
Yep.
What are you seeing?
Well, that's and I there's a chapter in the book, and I'll do this again,
Yep.
called, there we go. There's a chapter in there called I'm riffing off of a Minnesota-based movie. It's called The Assassination of George Floyd by the Coward Derek Chauvin. And I talk a lot about the individual choices, the structural issues, and then the fact that there's a reason why this was such a hard prosecution to do, which is that we don't have a precedent in the legal system to hold police accountable.
Absolutely not.
Right.
Right.
And so because of COVID, because of some other stuff, there was a delay. My station is 5 blocks away from 38th in Chicago. And so had we been dispatched at the same time the paramedics, my crew would have arrived while George Floyd was still alive. But for various reasons, nothing evil, just a screw up, we did not get dispatched until 10 minutes after the medics did. And so by the time we arrived, the medics had been there a minute or 2 minutes ahead of us, loaded him into the ambulance, and they'd driven away. So we got to an empty scene, walked in, and no one, like other than the group of young people, bystanders and eyewitnesses on the street, no one, two of the officers were literally said, "What are you here? We didn't call you," thinking that we were there for a fire alarm.
Wow.
And I said, "Well, we were called for," he said, "We just need it's Officer Tao." He said, "We just need EMS." I said, "We are EMS." And he kind of mumbled something about drugs. And and under my breath, I was like, "Asshole," and kept going. But we went into the store because our whole thing was there was reported that there's one with a mouth injury at 38th in Chicago at Cup Foods. And so our policy is we go into the address and we look around. And so no one had said the ambulance already left, right? And I walked past Donald Williams, I walked past Darnell Frazier, the youngers. They were traumatized, they were upset, they were shouting. But contrary to the police narrative, no one stopped us, no one interfered with us. Like it was a handful, maybe a half dozen of young, upset youth, or under 30, right? And then I go into the store and I'm looking around because I'm expecting to see someone down on the ground. And the one of the off-duty firefighter who is the eyewitness came up kind of out of the side and told me what had happened. But she was so upset, so distraught, I had no context. And so while I was talking to her, and then I ran into J. Alexander King, one of the junior officers, in the back of the store, and he said, "Hey, oh, they left." And right as he was saying they went away, but still not saying what they had, my radio and his crackled, and the paramedics said, "We need fire, right away, 36 in Park." And so we jumped on a rig, hauled ass over there. I still did not have any context for what was happening. I opened that ambulance door, and because I thought we'd been a call, because we generally get called with the paramedics or ahead of the paramedics, depending on the call.
Yeah.
So I had no knowledge that they had already left. I open up the door of the ambulance, and they are already, probably 5 minutes ahead of us in terms they've got the Lucas cardiac, the compression device going. They've got, they're trying to get an IV in. They've got his clothes cut off. Like they're doing all this stuff, and I had no warning that this is what was happening. And then we just jumped in and helped them do the stuff, and we worked all the rest of the way. Because I've been on other calls like this, and I know what generally happens. I sent my rig back to the scene to look out for the off-duty firefighter because I was worried that she was going to get swept up in either get a cop backlash right away, or I knew she was traumatized. I wanted them to help her out. Yeah. And then once we all left the stab-room and we were cleared and the staff was continuing what we'd been doing in the ambulance, I went right to the deputy, my boss, to say, "Hey, we were just on a bad call." At that time,
so you knew right away.
Well, yes and no. At that time, I did not know how bad. I just knew that this was someone who'd been killed by the police. There was not a gunfight there, and I just had to what the crowd was saying, which was more accurate than what the cops were saying. And and what the off-duty firefighter said in passing. She came by our station later, and she had her own video, and so at that point, even before I saw Darnella Frazier's, I got a glimpse, and it was still like unbelievable to us, right? And so that's the long short of it.
I think that's a really important point to make, because I think people forget, and especially Chief Rondo just was on NPR and promoting his book, like, and we can debate whether he took accountability or not or whatever, but I think people forget that the official story from MPD was that this was a medical emergency, nothing to see here,
Mhm.
right? But what I'm hearing is from medical professionals, you knew, hey, there's something happened here. I don't know exactly what happened, but something happened here that's not that's outside the scope.
Well,
Is that accurate to say?
well, I think, Ryan, I mean, this is the thing that bedevils me, vexes me, concerns me, that we don't have a context, right? There have been so many cases where somebody has died in custody, and the answer has been they suffered a medical emergency.
Right, right.
And I want to be clear here. There, there are systemic issues in place in terms of the police aren't looking to to throw themselves under the bus. The way that the legal system and the medical system work separately, right? And although a lot of the
Yeah.
medical examiners are sit in the same office as the police, and so that what happened the first day or second day after Mr. Floyd was killed was the PIO. The statement came out, that standard neutral neutered language.
Yeah.
Someone, a suspect was being detained, sustained a medical emergency, was declared dead at a local hospital. That is like, you can put that on so many deaths that it was like, that's not untrue, but it ignores what happened, right?
Right. Right.
And before a year before this happened, the young man in Aurora, Colorado, Elijah McClain,
Yeah.
got ganked by the cops because some white lady saw a strange looking young black man walking down the street. The cops grab, like, it's so much of it is how the culture in the system. Man had, young guy, he was tiny, had headphones on, hoodie up, or a cap on, so he wasn't obeying orders. They
And
grabbed him.
he actually apologizes to us, said, "I'm
The
sorry,
whole
I
thing,
just want to go home.
yeah,
Like, I'm sorry I threw up on you."
right.
It's
Right.
heartbreaking.
It's
If you for people watching, if you don't know the story in the case of Elijah McClain out in Aurora, Colorado, please like Google that, see what's going on. It's to Jeremy's point, it's about as clear an indictment of the culture of policing as you can get.
but I want to
If George Floyd isn't.
I want to build on this specifically though, because I've got because I'm writing about it elsewhere, but I think it was about 12 to 19 minutes before the paramedics showed up. And in that 12 to 19 minutes, the two or three cops basically did the same thing to him, to Elijah McClain, that the police here did to George Floyd, which was kind of manhandled him, bodied him, held him down. Because here's the thing: humans do not like being choked, do not like being crushed.
Right,
The
imagine
more
that.
they panic, the more the police mindset is the person is resistant. And I don't think it's a con. I think they literally do, like I've said and I've written about, it's a training issue. And so by the
Sure.
time the paramedics showed up, Elijah McClain was hypoxic, meaning he wasn't getting enough breath, which means he was kind of hysterical, right? He put his system into crisis, or they had put his system into crisis. The
Yeah.
paramedics then came in and basically took the police at their word that this guy was fighting, and then because of that white, what's it called? White myopic view, saw him as a 6'9", 300-pound man when he was 5'4", 127. So they
Right.
gave him too much sedatives. But the point I want to make is nothing happened at first until after George Floyd was killed, until after the riots. And then they reopened that case. The paramedics ended up getting more time in their trial than the police did. Right?
Oh,
So that the
tell me the
police,
impact of that. How does that, what does that mean for you?
well, for me, it means that we still, as a, like, again, the medical system, the legal system, we seem incapable of understanding the causal effects of tasing somebody, of holding someone down. So to get back to your point about Rondo, former chief, yes,
Yeah.
he testified against Chauvin. But had Derek Chauvin gotten off George Floyd when George Floyd went unresponsive and got the other two officers, because that, like, the positional asphyxia, two men on his trunk plus Chauvin on the neck, the trunk is what's stopping him from breathing and causing the positional asphyxia. When he went unresponsive, had they got off of him, they would have followed their policies to the T, and they would likely have not been convicted. George Floyd would probably have been dead no matter what. So
that was going to be my question. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, so when it was a big deal at some small quarters that Chief Arredondo testified against Chauvin, but that was an easy one to throw away because he did. But that allowed them to protect the department. But he did not. But that's what I'm saying. They still have not really understood the causal effects of that.
So that brings us really smoothly into another topic I wanted to touch on with you, Jeremy, which is this. You mentioned it's a training issue, right? And so one of the things that has happened that's come out of the uprisings and sort of this movement for accountability and racial justice, ostensibly, has been the DOJ and certain city police departments entering into agreements around reform. Two of those cities were Louisville after Breonna Taylor was killed, and Minneapolis after George Floyd was murdered. And just yesterday, I think it was, the Trump administration announced that they're no longer doing that. They're not entering into that agreement. Yeah. Can you talk about the significance of that, how that might connect to is the type of training that you're talking about the type of things that the DOJ might be looking at providing for police, or is that even outside the scope? What do you think is happening there? What type of trainings do you think reform might be necessary, if any at all? And I'm an abolitionist. For people talking, I'm a police abolitionist. I think the way we do policing needs to fundamentally change.
Right.
So I don't know that there's any reform anyway.
Well, if we go back 5 summers when there were cries for abolition and then for reform, whatever, I said we have my take of it is we have never, in good faith and actual effort, attempted true reform. So saying reform doesn't work I don't think that's accurate because we never tried it. But because we've never tried it, it's a bankrupt system, right? So I think that from talking to lawyer friends that I know who've been involved in kind of police accountability, those consent decrees, they are something to be used, tool. But it's really easy to slap paint on a rusty car, right? And so what was interesting,
we're really good at that too. Yeah. We're really good at being like, oh, look at this performance. We took a knee with Kente cloth. We got a Black Lives Matter sign in our yard, and qualified immunity though. We're not gonna take a look at that.
Well, and I think it was interesting reading about other cities that had previous consent decrees. And you don't get there because you met oops once. Like, you get there because, like, the Minneapolis Fire Department had a 30-year federal injunction, not because one person said something racist 30 years before, but because decades of resistance and outright racist, dumb behavior got caught. They got in federal court. So the other places that have been held to consent decrees, I think there have been some reforms, some progress. How much of that is window dressing? How much does the money go away? How much are you changing the overall approach or mentality of policing? So talking to lawyer friends who are more on kind of holding police accountability, on some level, the city doesn't want to open up its own liability for having a police force that has done rogue things for years. So I don't, so I was interested yesterday seeing, and I'm trying to limit how angry I get every day. Like, I couldn't really listen to the press conference where Mayor Fry and Chief O'Hara were talking, because they were basically saying Trump can do what he wants, but we're still committed to trying to make things better.
Yeah, I don't.
Right.
That doesn't instill a whole lot of faith in me
But
from those two.
but it's better than saying, "Oh well," right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
and I think those, and because Fry's such a target, and I don't know if you followed last week, I think it was, where Councilmember Jenkins and O'Hara and they did kind of like this unity in the community, and they kind of walked
I saw
down.
something about it.
They
Yeah.
walked down Chicago and met at that evangelical church kitty corner from Cup Foods or Unity Foods.
Yep.
So on the activist side, people were losing their shit. Like, it's like, because there were a lot of cops walking, and it was peaceful and all that. But a lot of the people who've been holding it down there were like, this feels like an incursion, right? This is
Yeah.
then you go over to the right wing, Minneapolis is burning Facebook group or whatever, and it's this worthless police chief and this shitty mayor are in there among the
Absolutely.
gangsters and the savages, and I'm like, only in the most benighted white imaginations is 38th in Chicago anything other than a spot that it is, right? It takes such like aggressive imagination to paint that as like, because I don't think these cats saw Training Day or Colors to have a reference like, oh, they're flipping pigeons. Oh, this is, like, Ryan, I'm telling you, I had to argue with one of my former bosses in like 2022, right before Chauvin was found guilty, because he was getting his info from Alpha News and from copwatch.com or whatever, not
Yeah.
copwatch, but cops.com. And he's like, there's a machine gun turret up there and blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's Billy Briggs with a camera, you ass. Like, I was like, I work in that neighborhood. I go there, I respond to calls there. We sometimes we get barbecue, sometimes we get barbecue turkey, sometimes like we go to the coffee shop, because that is our job as civil servants. And I'm trying to help my coworkers
Right.
who do not necessarily feel comfortable get more comfortable. And I'm trying to get young folks there to recognize that as much as I look like, I'm there to try to be a help. Right. So that's how you establish community. Right. And so I said, hey, I've been here since 2017, and I was here before then. Like, I know the people here. I've got relationships with the people here. Because for a while they were making an overall quote safety call. The paramedics wouldn't come in because they felt uncomfortable, so they required a police escort. I was like, so meanwhile, citizens with chest pain, citizens with asthma, people having strokes and heart attacks, they are not receiving the care they deserve because of some white fright thing. And there was no there for me to say, hey, let's please stop this, because they just hid behind safety.
Right.
So for the police reform or for the consent decree, I don't know, because I don't know how much fundamentally they've changed. I don't know, I don't know if they really understand how those officers killed a man without meaning to.
And I think that's like such a fundamentally the inability. No, that's not what I mean to say. The absence of wanting to know that answer is really all you need to know about the way whiteness operates.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The fundamental, like, oh, we know what it is, drug use or whatever it is. There's no louder way to tell somebody that your life doesn't matter than to not care to find the answer to why you're no longer here. Right? Why you're not and for those that followed the case, people in Minneapolis were connected to that. I know are connected to George Floyd in very real ways. And he's not getting married to his fiance. His daughter doesn't have her father here. All of these things, like, to not want to know the answer to that question. How more clearly can you say it just isn't worth it? You don't matter. It's not worth our time. It's not worth our energy. I can't imagine a more clear way to say that than to not care about to listen to the professionals and tell you why this happened, and then to actively resist the training and the policies that might keep this from happening again. Right?
Well,
Like that's
well, but even at the end of 2022, the doctors, like the emergency doctors who were in charge of training the police, they're both gone now, or at least not doing that position anymore. But they were both kind of suburban sheriffs, like volunteer sheriffs. So they were cop-minded doctors, and they were the ones who were talking about. They were still pushing the whole excited delirium thing. You know, someone's out of control,
yeah,
they're danger, but they never said what to do about it, right? And so
super
then
important.
after it was discredited, that's one of the things when I was testifying in the federal trial. One of the officers might have been maybe Tutal's lawyer. It might have been Officer Lane's lawyer. Was trying to get me to admit that excited delirium was a real thing. And I was like, I'm on the stand. It's a federal court. It's pretty intimidating. The whole system is weird. You know, and I
Yeah,
was like, and what I'd said when I was getting prepped, which is what he was reading off a transcript, was excited delirium is bullshit. But I'm not, you know, like I was like, I'm not going to say that in court, but I was trying to dance around it because if they could say it's real, then they could say this guy died of excited delirium. And my point is that's not a real thing. It is
right,
attached after the fact when people die when they've been restrained by police or medics, right? That you
right.
and I can
And
say, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's like to me whenever I've heard that, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I remember hearing that during the trial. You know what I mean? Things like that, where I'm like, it sounds like what you're saying is that people like you said earlier, human beings don't like to be choked. They don't like to be have their chest kneeled on or
Yeah.
in the prone position on the ground. Like that sounds like a pretty natural response to
Right.
have to
Well,
this thing.
and
And that yeah, it seemed like a cop out.
well, but I what I also think it ignores, and this is where I argue this too for a lot of like for my coworkers, for all of us, is that, and this is where I say the training is essential. When we come across somebody in crisis, somebody who is too high, too drunk, having a mental health issue, a diabetic, someone with Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, like, and they like if I come up to you and say, "Hey, man, how you doing?" and you start growling or licking the ground, or you've already told me all I need to know, which is that you and I are in different universes right now, right?
Right.
So most firefighters, because we don't have, because we're not charged with transporting the way the paramedics are, we're not police officers. We basically get good at just being like, oh, okay, let's talk. Let's, like be chill,
Being human with each other.
trying to, right? But that
Yeah.
if someone needs to go somewhere, if we need to, like, I had a call where a guy was way too methed out and was trying to stab whatever he thought was in his hands in front of his girlfriend and their child and the
Oh,
girlfriend's dad. Like this was like these are dangerous and chaotic scenes, and he did not know what was going on. So us giving him lawful orders, right? You could tell my dad who's got Alzheimer's now. You could say, "Sir, put that down." He won't know what he's holding because he doesn't know where he is. Like, and
sure.
that is my point. I write about that a lot in the book. Like, that is the piece. If and I've had to watch, or I've watched all the body cam from all the officers, and George Floyd was, whether he was just high or just drunk or both, like watching the video inside the store. But you're allowed to be drunk and high in America, like, and
I was
so
gonna say
yeah,
you can be
so
drunk and high and text military planes on signal plans on signal
right.
group chats
But I'm saying, but
apparently.
like from the very beginning of that call, when the first officer went up to him, it was clear because he was slurring, he was nervous, he was panicked. He'd already told them, and he wasn't trying to run away, he wasn't trying to drive. He
And he
so
wasn't a threat.
he was, and that's where we get to what you were saying, like, but if you can only see black, you only see race as threat, right? Because all they had to do was say, "Hey, man, give us a real 20." Like
Right.
whether or not he deliberately passed a bogus bill, it was accidental. Like you or me, they would have said, "Hey, man, just give us a bill."
Right.
right?
Just go pay
And
for it. Let's be done
and
with it. It's a wrap.
and if you watch the videos, like until Chauvin got on scene, when it was just the two junior guys, they did a pretty good job letting him sit down, letting Mr. Floyd calm himself, catch his breath. But he was saying, "I'm claustrophobic." He never said, "I'm not going to prison," or "F you." He was apologetic. He's like, "Please, man." I mean, from before they like, so this was someone who was having a crisis. There was no hurry
Right.
to rush him away, and when but that's a matter of flexibility. And for the police and that training, and with two young officers and the senior officer coming in shouting, like, "Don't get punked by some street guy. You got to buck up."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All that
Yeah.
male bullshit, or all that cop or
Yeah.
authoritative, not just police officer, but all that authoritative bullshit leads to people overreacting and acting badly. And from the time Chauvin came up and said, "Let's go," and Officer J. Alexander King on the left side of the car started grabbing, and that's when George Floyd panicked because he was claustrophobic. And within 45 seconds, he was on the ground. And then 9 minutes later, he was dead.
And it's yeah,
Like,
that's the
there's no,
beginning of the
like, that's
end
what I'm
right
saying.
there.
And so listening to all the right wingers who cannot wrap their heads around the fact that the police killed somebody and are accountable for that killing. There was no fighting. It doesn't matter that he was high. It doesn't matter that he was drunk. It doesn't matter what he did 15 years ago.
Right.
Right? It does not matter. And that's the part where it's the other side of what you're saying, which is that how many white people watch dead black people over dinner time news and just ate their dinner? But then how many white people cannot swallow the notion that we are accountable as a society for the things that have made it really comfortable to be white in this society?
Yeah. You brought up a good point and gets us to the next topic I wanted to touch on with you, which is this idea of accountability. And like you said, there's a whole segment of the population that are screaming pretty loudly, and I'm down here in Georgia, in Atlanta, right outside Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, and she's been the most recent that I've seen loudest voice who has kind of re-energized this call for Trump to pardon Chauvin. Seems like it's gaining some steam. I saw a post on social media from you that where you were like, "Hey, I've been telling people he's gonna pardon Chauvin on the 5th year anniversary if he gets elected." And then you wrote a great piece in the Star Trib in the op-ed. Salute to you for that, and thank you for adding that perspective. Talk a little bit about that. Like, one, do you really think that's going to happen? What happens in Minneapolis if that happens? What's the message? I mean, these are all things you wrote about, and if you, I will link to the Star Trib. Well,
Sure.
maybe because I don't
And no,
really.
it's not
Yeah.
paywall. No, you can go start like it
Okay,
was
good. I was like, I don't want to put money in their pocket,
no, no,
but
no, no, no,
I
no.
do want people to read what you wrote.
No, they're doing a good job this week putting everything related to the 5 year anniversary is basically no paywall. So
Okay,
and
great.
I worked like hell trying to get that to a wider audience, but no one, like, it's just like I appreciate that the strip did it, and they basically let it run at, like, it's way longer than their normal length. Like they did me a
It's a
solid.
thorough piece.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. The man who pardoned the people who attacked the police, the man who fancies himself a dictator, the man who, I'm almost 60, man. Like, growing up in the 80s on the East Coast, Trump was a rap punchline. And then when he did,
absolutely.
right,
Even
and when he did the Central Park Five dirty and kept going, calling for the full page ad, calling for their death penalty, even after they were clearly uh, innocent and vindicated and then exonerated, he would not back down. Right.
still hasn't. Still hasn't. It still hasn't.
So that tells us all we need to know. Like, that sense of bristling, like, white fury. And I tell you that what I think a lot of the nice, kind of nice white people don't understand is it's the fact that a lot of white people had to hold their tongues after 2020 because the sheer inhumanity of what we saw made it undeniable. And so they sat on their crosses and on their hard R's and seethed. And then what we ended up having was these attacks on woke, which isn't a thing, right?
At all.
the attacks on DEI, the attacks on BLM, on CRT, all the initials are just another way of saying the hard R, right?
Yep. Yep.
Let's go bread and like it's the same, but they're getting away with it because they've got the numbers, and it's that malignant white fury meeting the abdication of accountability, right?
Yeah.
That hysterical, I cannot accept the facts about this country, and so I'm not going to allow anyone to talk about them, right? If we were really so supreme, we would have no problem letting people talk about it.
Listen,
right?
apparently you got to defend Caitlin Clark against Angel Reed and all that just to make sure that, you know what I mean, everybody knows how great you are.
Hey man, I just went to my 40th high school reunion last weekend. I was flashing back to splitting time between watching the Lakers Celtics epic finals and chasing young women. And none of us are young anymore, but that same contrived, and it used to be just sports, sports talk, and then I went to school in Boston where, the hard R was everywhere. Like,
yeah.
Like it was, there's a reason why Boston is Boston, right? And
I got some clients out there, and it's a different world. It's a different world.
And, and now it's fabricated. Like, like we don't need to compare Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. Let them become who they are. Like, it's just such dumb, but that's a separate thing. We don't need MSNBC 24 hours. We don't need CNN. We should just nuke Fox News down in your neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or actually, that was CNN's down there. I'm sorry, my bad. And then
they're on enough TVs down here to be down here. Trust me.
And then ESPN. Like, we don't need 24 hours a day because they just jibber jabber. They have to fill the thing. And so now we're going to have hours and hours about what's his name making the choking. Like, it's just it's just filling airwaves, and then it allows people to become dumb. Right? They're not thoughtful. There's no nuance. But I think. I would not be surprised if Trump does it just to stick poke a stick into the eye of Minneapolis.
And I was talking about this. I think you're right? I think you're spot on that there's just this, a lot of people accuse me, and probably you, I'm interested in if you've had this experience of like, oh, you're the guiltiest white man ever. How come you hate yourself so much? And I always find that interesting because I'm like, I actually think the most common manifestation of white guilt is the refusal to own the history that is objective in this country, right? So I find that interesting, but there's this inability to tell the truth, right? To own it, and so we sanitize, we scrub, we do all that, and it serves its purpose. It serves its purpose for whiteness to divide people, to give people something to cling to. And I do think Trump is that petty, right? That he would do something against Minneapolis. I don't think it's a coincidence that the DOJ pulled and the consent decrees is for those watching. Jeremy used that term. That's officially what the DOJ uses to enter into reform and some oversight. I don't think it's a coincidence. I also don't think it's a coincidence that this started to pick up steam as Trump is in the Middle East, in these majority Muslim countries, taking money, doing business deals with people that his base hate, right? And you started to see some people on the far right being like, why are we taking money from them? Why are we, Islamophobia, anti-Arab racism, all of these things. And so I also think it's a part of the calculus, maybe not from Trump personally, but from certainly the people around him, to say, politically, this might be a good move to appease your base in this moment where they're asking some questions. Now, some of that critique has fallen apart, right? As the budget bill passed, things like that. But I think there's just a way where it's this really superficial, really shallow, which whiteness is, right? And him pardoning Chauvin feels like almost low-hanging fruit at this time.
It is. Right.
Like, it doesn't feel like this grandiose gesture anymore. It feels like everybody I know that's talking about him is like, oh yeah, we're getting ready for that.
Sure.
He's going to do that. We expect him to do that. So the second part of that question is, does it matter? What will happen in Minneapolis? Like, does it matter to people that he's going to do this?
Right. I want to go, mean, I don't think there are going to be a whole lot of right wingers who are hanging in on this conversation. I'm not sure.
Nah, I get a couple trolls every now and then, but nah,
Yeah,
there ain't a whole
I
lot of
mean,
them.
people interested in the conversation because I think, like the Central Park Five thing is like Trump's racism, his anger, and that's the thing, the anger that a lot of people like him felt that they could like that for once an officer was held accountable for killing a black man.
Right.
That
Right.
that shook people in a way that again, like the guiltiest of white supremacists are the ones who have to make sure that nothing ever challenges these false claims of how great we are. I think it is like because he hates Minneapolis, he hates Minnesota, like
Hates
and
her.
and I love the fact that most progressives in the city feel that the mayor is kind of a patsy for a toady for the big money interests, and the New York
Right.
Times cannot find a way to have a critical line about him, and yet Trump's over there talking about this crazy liberal whiny mayor weak, and at this point I don't take anything Trump says seriously because it's just brain melt, but
Yeah.
as a provocation, right? It will throw a bone to a very small group of people. I can't like I don't think the base gives a shit about the Middle East because the base allowed all the back the blue let him pardon the January Sixers,
That's
and
a good
so
point. That might be all they need, right?
right. I mean, there's a
Is
certain point
that.
it's like they've been so lost in the. There's no way to sustain a logical engagement for anything that's happening. Does it matter? What I hope we are clear enough as a city not to get tricked into doing something because all he wants to do is push the button and send the military in, right? And the
Absolutely.
first thing he will do is send a bunch of Humvees or Bradleys down Chicago Ave and plow through that beautiful memorial, right?
Yep.
That is what he wants to do. That provocation, and that's I think what he's looking to do on a grand level in the nation. Weaponizing the police, weaponizing ICE, all that like it and if we are disciplined and recognize first of all Chauvin's not getting out of prison anytime soon and he's going to be
Right.
sent from a federal to a state where he's more likely to have a less happy existence,
Yep.
like and the governor's been clear about that, right? Like even
Ellison's been clear about
yeah,
that.
both of them, but
Like
yeah,
that
but
man, that man's got 22 and a half years
yeah,
to the state of Minnesota.
right. And but it's the same way, but this is like this is the piece that I've kind of tried to tell people all along is there was a lot of hurt and anger that boiled over those first couple days of the uprising. There were a lot of deliberate provocation and saboteurs roaming around, predominantly white supremacists, but not only. Like
Yeah.
there were some anarchists who, like I read this anarchist like post evaluation about what they were doing, and like it was
Yep.
fascinating to read, but opportunistic fuckery essentially. But I saw more scary looking white people running around looking for mayhem when I was working at the like towards the end of the stuff. Like that's for me remains true. And people, it's all the white people are like Minneapolis is still burning. It's like fuck you. It was over in
Yeah.
5 days.
Oh,
Right.
100%. I was up there, and I was doing I was involved in organizing, I was involved
Right.
in like community safety stuff during the uprisings and all that. And definitely saw the white supremacists out with the cardboard over the license plates and all that. My experience was that they weren't where a lot of people said they were, right? Like the danger wasn't where people said the danger
Right.
was.
Right.
Right. And that's similar. And this didn't get the type of media attention that um the uprisings and the summer of racial reckoning got, but the fourth precinct, when Jamar Clark was murdered by Minneapolis police, that was a beautiful space, right? The violence came from outside white nationalists shooting at it. There wasn't violence in the camp and stuff.
Right, and a confused Asian kid who was hanging out with the.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
And so
exactly.
I was a chief at that. I was chief of the 5th district, which in Minneapolis is like northeast, and
Yep,
so,
yep.
but Plymouth cuts through my area, so I was working that night where those guys started shit over there, right?
where they were shooting at him?
Yeah. And I was where
Yeah.
and yes, it's hard, but I also think when I testified in the state trial and all of downtown was shut down and they were like, and I
Yeah.
watched and it was a fortified, barricaded military installation, and I kind of said, well, first of all, what verdict are they expecting,
Yeah.
and who are they expecting to start shit, right? And then
Yeah.
as soon as he was found guilty, they all went away. And so there is that in that, like the feebleness of a white imagination, only being able to see, like not being able to see black suffering and black grief, but the fear of blackness. And so this idea that all black people are only going to riot. And I was like, I was so much more worried about white supremacists coming in than I was worried about, like if it had been innocent and people had been protesting, I worried that there would be white supremacists who would look opportunistically start shit, right?
Absolutely.
And I was like, I
Absolutely.
hope at the upper levels, the military and police, someone intelligence were on top of that. But I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm not. That's not
That might
something.
be wishful thinking.
Yeah.
I think you bring up an interesting point too in terms of and it's connected to your work, or at least I was drawing these connections. You talk about trauma sponges, right? In the way that people in your work that you experience so much of it. And that's true even in just the human experience, right? Like Resma talks about this a lot, and like in the somatic abolition work that has gotten a little bit more popular, this idea that white folks, men, people who are in this, like we have our own work to do that's healing work.
Yeah.
That is not this just abstract sort of like hippity dippity
Sure.
weird stuff. It's legitimately like we have generations, and now we understand that through epigenetics that our genes activate in different ways depending on our circumstances and our environment.
Yep.
And when you hear about one of my colleagues is writing a historical fiction work, and she is studying the 30 Years War and some of the Europe stuff to understand what's going on. And it's like, when you realize what Europeans were doing to each other, what those folks we now call white were doing to each other, you understand how we could do that to other people.
Yeah.
And we've never ever taken seriously that healing work. Right.
Yeah.
And we've been in space. You've heard me talk. That's what my work has centered on in these last 5 years, is the work of what I call recognizing the wound of whiteness on those of us that move as white, so that we can begin to heal that and show up not for other people who are suffering from racism, but heal from what whiteness has done to us and show up in service of a different world altogether.
Right.
Because whiteness and the consumption and the disconnection and all that organizes society is not good for us.
Right.
Period. It's just not a sustainable way to organize society.
Right.
Look at what's happening, right? And so I wonder, Jeremy, as we get close to wrapping up, I got a couple more things I wanted to touch on, but from your perspective, what have we learned in these last 5 years? That says it all, brother.
There's so much. You and I could have a very lovely conversation about what you were just talking about, because I think,
And maybe that would be a part 2 of this.
well, because honestly, I think you look at all these gas bag influencers,
Right.
right? And you just look at Josh Hawley, you look at JD Vance, you look at the rapist Tate, like,
oh my gosh,
selling. But this gets to both what you were saying, like, you and I don't have white guilt, right? We own. I've said, like, I try to make up, and I'm pretty clear about all the damage that I carry with me. I'm not going to put a gun in my mouth. So I'm going to try to go forward and heal and do my best. But even with my book, like, I'm not writing for Black people. I'm not writing for the women on the job.
Right.
I am writing to, for, about, and against the structures of whiteness. And I'm testifying and witnessing for the people of color and the women who aren't empowered to speak their own thing. And it's a tough line.
Right.
Like, like, like you and I both, like looking at the way, like, I'm just going to go on quickly, like Tim Wise
Please.
was groundbreaking for a long time. It's not,
Absolutely.
and then CNN, MSNBC bring him on instead of Resma because Tim Wise is more palatable. Does Tim
Hmm.
Wise not take that opportunity because none of us are making money doing this, right?
Right.
Does he
Right.
take the opportunity? But then the backlash came, and that's the stuff that's outside of what the actual mission is, but that's where, and that's kind of my MSNBC, CNN, ESPN issue. People just rather than just letting somebody do something, let's learn from it. But I think the understanding the wound and the hollowness of all these young men seeking steroids and Zen and meat and Joe Rogan and Andrew Tate, like it is such a hollow emptiness, right?
Absolutely.
And it's so like, and so it's like, where are we going to be to get past that? Like, what's going to be at the end of that when people wake up and they realize? And that's where I think that the weight of that white guilt and white grief is so heavy on them, because they're going to get 10 years down the road and realize, oh, I'm a douchebag. I'm a, like, um, well, I, what have we
Listen,
learned? What have we learned in 5 years? Part of me thinks, that's where I defer to my my black friends. I'm like, they knew the score 10 years ago. They knew it
right,
before
right, right,
Trump.
right.
I mean, like that idea that a lot of black folks I know just shrugged when Trump won. They're like, yeah, you're white people. This is white people shit. Like, he is materially ill affecting because he's empowering more racist white people, but he's empowering them. He's not creating them.
Well,
Right.
and he's not new, right?
Yeah,
That's the thing that
exactly. Right. And so,
my background as a history teacher, as a historian, I can say this is unprecedented for my lifetime.
yeah,
Right. Like I certainly haven't lived through this. Perhaps my parents, depending on how old they are, haven't. But Trump's not new. Trump's not unprecedented.
no,
Trump is actually probably more American than a lot of what people say is fundamentally American.
sure.
Right? Ideas of equality, ideas of equity, of justice are not American when you look at policies enacted. When you
Yeah,
look at things like fundamentally in that has been affirmative action for white people.
right,
Fundamentally in America has been limited access.
right,
Fundamentally to America has been equivocation about oppression and violence and apologies for it. Like all the things and lies. All of these things are extremely American and are extremely what Trump is about. Um
it's just
and so
depressing.
and
It's
not
just
to
depressing how dumb it
on a
can.
sad note, because also what's very American though is resistance to that, right? America is fundamentally about tension
Yeah,
and a battle between that, because for there were the Charles Sumners, there were the John Browns, there are the Ann Bradens, the Miles Hortons. There are these people who have always stood up and been like, hey, actually, we need to pump our brakes and rethink these things, because these certain values that we hold are actually really revolutionary and are beautiful and great. And it is my job to hold us accountable to those values,
right.
right? And to call out when we're not there. And so I'm thinking about my own answer to this question. And I think like, and this is where the educator comes in this conversation for me too, is like clearly not enough.
Well,
Like
we
clearly not enough. And it's to your point where I don't know that we're asking the right questions.
right,
Right? We're still not getting to the what actually killed George Floyd
right,
is a microcosm of like what is actually causing racism?
sure,
What is actually causing oppression, sexism, the toxic masculinity we see? What is actually causing mass shootings,
yeah,
the epidemic of unhappiness and suicides in white male community? Um, I like
yeah,
we haven't learned enough because we haven't asked the right questions. Is how I would answer that.
right. And I think about, like, I'm not going to quote it right, but like what some of what Resma talked about in terms of like that somatic, somatic reflection, in terms of being able to sit with it. And we are not, and I'm going to say we as a collective whiteness are not able to sit, and as men particularly, like, so
Right.
as we are not able to sit with that discomfort. And so what you've seen in the past 5 years, after all the well-meaning signs on the yard and this, that, and the other, is the complexity of it overwhelmed a lot of people. But I think
Absolutely.
so very much about both about like Professor Glaude, Eddie Glaude, and then also Baldwin. And I was looking over to my left on, I can't remember which of his essays, when Baldwin talks about like the that dangerous white innocence,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That
He touches on it in a talk to teachers for
I
sure.
think it is, yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's another one, but that is what we've seen in the past 5 years, 50 odd years after he wrote about it. And so, one hand, it's
Right.
cliche for a white dude to be talking about Baldwin, but the other hand, his points were 50 years ahead of the curve and still ahead of the curve because we can't even catch up. Right.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
but that all we had to do 5 years ago, but all we've had forever to do is stop, look around, and say redlining,
Right.
slavery, all these things, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, like, so, like I work a job where people of color were not allowed to join, where
Right.
women were legally prohibited from joining. I'm not better than anyone else. I've just benefited from that, and for the fact that too many white people getting to that line, breathe, accept responsibility, and as Claudia says, and then begin again. Right? We had that 5 years
Love it.
ago. Right?
Yeah.
We had that 5 years ago, and everyone else turned away and fled.
Yeah.
And
And,
just
and now systematically we're retreating and trying to sanitize even the little bit of openings that were there,
right,
right?
right.
But it's works like yours, and I want to return to this to give you the last word with a question, right? And I'm gonna throw your book back up here for folks to see because I think it's again an amazing book. But I'm curious, man, how is the message of your book, right? Like you talk about the ways identity impacts how particularly responders are showing up, right? How is that message received in your field?
My message?
Yeah.
um, uh, there are folks who really appreciate, I think, what I was trying to talk about. There are folks who wish I would shut the F up. Um, there are a lot of people who don't think that critically. And that's part of the problem is,
Right.
like, I spent a long time patiently trying to engage with a lot of like the traditionalist white guys. And so I have to own the fact that I've got the privilege of education, right?
Right.
I don't come from a blue collar background. And so some of this I had to check my privilege, check my presumptions, and then sitting and listening. It's like, but this is also really dumb. This is bullshit. This is a lot of guys who sit around enjoying the fact that they can sit around and say racist shit and sexist shit and homophobic shit because it's a bunch of white dudes, whether you've got a fire hat on or a construction helmet on. Like
Yep.
it's the same stuff, right? And there are some people who get it, and then a lot of people don't think about it. And I one of the things I argue in the book is our failure to think about it sets us up, like what you were saying, all these crises of personal vision, of self, right? So the soaring PTSD and depression, despair, despondency, and suicide, and numbing themselves come because if every day you're seeing things that you can't do anything about and you try to put a wall up, but the wall falls, like you're left naked and shivering. And that's what I kind of say, like as I said at the beginning, like I push for like a radical compassion.
Yeah.
I'm really cynical, but I still try to, like, I recognize that the little I can do when I meet somebody right there, right then, for that 5 to 45 minutes is just try to be good with them, right? And
Yeah.
that sometimes is all we can do.
You know what? That's a powerful message to wrap up our conversation with. Folks, please go check out Trauma Sponges. Jeremy, how can folks get in touch with you? You got a social media they could follow, we can link to,
Yeah, it's
things like that?
jeremynorton.info is my website. And then it's Prolix Gringo, Prolix Gringo at Instagram.
Well, we'll throw that handle in the description on the YouTube after. Again, the book is Trauma Sponges, Dispatches from the Scarred Heart of Emergency Response.
And hey, I will say,
And
if anyone coming to this from your world, like from your world, back half the book, because the first half of it, I'm trying to establish firefighting and this and that. But the back half, like from back half of the book, I really look at from COVID on. I really dig into the way that racial issues um, play out.
yeah, I really was interested. It was very interesting to me, the like the way that you set that up. And no, I appreciate your work, man. Thank you so much for finding time tonight. And good luck. And let's connect next time I'm in town. Let's go grab some coffee.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. It's an honor to talk, and you all take care. Peace.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy.
All right,
Peace. All right, folks. That was Jeremy Norton. Fantastic human being. It's really important for me to bring particularly white men onto the show to demonstrate that we are not all succumbing to the pressures that white supremacy puts on us, that white nationalism puts on us, that the mega campaigns put on us. We are resisting. Nowhere near enough of us. But folks like Jeremy definitely are, and are doing really good work. And so please go out and support him. Check out Trauma Sponges. Follow him on social media. I will I'll link to all that in the description and YouTube. And that's gonna do it for the show tonight, y'all. The boy is hungry. I want to go check out the wolves. By the time folks see this, and in between, it will be the 5th year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. I want to say peace to the people in Minneapolis who are struggling, or who might be struggling. This is an extra sensitive anniversary because the eyes of the country, lots of them are going to be on there. If Trump does do some wild stuff, please reach out to your people, to your community, and yeah, peace to Minneapolis, peace to Gaza, free Palestine, ceasefire now. And thank y'all for being here. Peace.